So I originally wanted to make this review spoiler free, but seeing as the game's best parts are spoiler related and the fact that it took me longer than I'd like to beat the game, I figured I'd try something new and just go into the game raw with all the spoilers out there. So yeah, if it wasn't already clear enough, spoilers will be present heavily in this review. For the past decade, I've come to love the Uncharted series for its fast action gameplay, insane set pieces, and its memorable characters, and part of that was due to the lead itself, Nathan Drake. With Nate's departure coming to a close in Uncharted 4 last year, Lost Legacy takes the challenge of continuing to tell the adventures in this huge thieving world with Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross this time. What started off as DLC turned into a standalone game that feels just like a full Uncharted experience would. It has great vistas, dangerous platforming, and of course a ton of intense moments. The big question though I had going in was, is this really needed, or is this just going to be simply more Uncharted? And while Lost Legacy clearly doesn't exist without its problems, in the end it delivered a unique take on the series that not only makes it stand apart from the other games, but makes it an adventure worth telling. Through the 6.5-hour campaign, Lost Legacy manages to deliver a different type of Uncharted game with fan favorite Chloe Fraser and Nadine Ross at the helm. The story motivation is nowhere near as compelling as Uncharted 4, and is clearly more focused on fun exploration this time around, but that in no way means the game doesn't have its moments. Chloe is on a much more personal journey dating back to when she was a child. This sadly didn't grab me as much as I would have hoped, but the story still definitely has some of its moments. But this, along with the characters, are probably my main gripes with the game, and left me most disappointed with the characters and just overall the story and how it unfolded near the end. But I guess at the same time, that's where the best parts of Lost Legacy shine, and I guess there's no going about it but saying the game just has incredible pacing and probably one of the best in any Uncharted game yet. The fact that I beat the game in 2 sittings tells you enough as it is. I was hooked to this game, honestly. The game does start off with that PSX demo that we all know by now, and then later opens up with Western Ghats, at least for the first half, and while the Western Ghats demo is a lot more open and can take you about an hour to possibly more than 2 if you want to look for everything, I guess it's a chapter where you could just build your own pacing. And honestly, the Western Ghats has some of the most beautiful scenery in that chapter, as well as just the encounters that you find in that level. I just found the Western Ghats to be a lot better than anything from Madagascar. Of course, it's not the strongest chapter, but I guess that's where the best parts come in, and that's pretty much the second half of Uncharted Lost Legacy. Now, Lost Legacy is kind of a game that builds up its pacing as it goes, so the second half, and honestly the last few chapters, are probably some of the best pacing that we've seen from Naughty Dog yet, as well as just the chapters just seem to outdo themselves constantly, and when you get to the chapter 9, the finale, it's just, we all know what happens there, and it just seems like it won't let off, and the pacing just keeps growing from there. So take the Uncharted 2 train sequence and combine it with the Uncharted 4 chase sequence, and you get one of the most thrilling set pieces in the series yet. But what makes this chapter so memorable and great is the fact that it doesn't seem to let up at any given time, and goes on for seemingly almost half an hour. It just really feels like a movie as the objectives change and the duo have to improvise. One of the best parts of the game is the twist and nods to the past games. Sam Drake is in this game, which was a big surprise for a lot of people. And not only is he really a cameo in this game, but he practically becomes a third member of the team in the later half of the game. After all the talk about Sully and Sam being a duo on its own, it was a nice surprise to see Sam out there by himself, continuing this life that he hinted to Nate at the end of Uncharted 4. While he was a great addition to the game, he was also kind of weirdly written. It almost felt as if he was just crammed in the game for the sole purpose of just giving you a familiar face related to Nate, and this was kind of shown through his dialogue and presence just through that whole entire game. Just kind of gave an unnatural vibe.
Oh, Nadine Ross.
Don't talk to me.
I was gonna say, you look good.
Was I not clear?
You know, in Uncharted 4, they built him as a serious character that was really after Henry Avery, but in this game, honestly, he just seems like a trickster and jokester, and honestly, we haven't really seen that side of Sam, so it kind of felt off, and it almost felt like he was weirdly written. Like, all of a sudden, he just became a new guy in this game. That's not to say his presence was bad. I think adding Sam to the game was generally a good choice, and was a great surprise to a lot of people if you weren't spoiled beforehand, but that's some gripes I had with the characters, because on Uncharted, you know, of course, is all story-driven and character-driven, so yeah, Sam was just kind of weirdly written. While not much is to be really said about the gameplay, I figured I'd talk about it briefly here because the game added 2 mechanics to the game, that being the lock picking and that being the silent pistol. Now the silent pistol is pretty good in my opinion. It added one of the worst flaws from Uncharted 4's stealth system, and that's the fact that if you wanted to take someone out quietly, you really had to get close, and really the only stealth options that you had were to get close and melee them. Now, what the whole silenced pistol does is pretty much give you a silenced weapon, as it says in the title, and lets you take out guys from farther distances. So this kind of adds to the whole stealth mechanic that they explored in Uncharted 4, and ultimately I'd say that the Lost Legacy has some of the best combat in the game, because when you take those mechanics and you mix that with the level design, honestly, Lost Legacy has some of the most replayable, you know, encounters in the game than I'd say even Uncharted 4. So honestly, Lost Legacy, if you're looking for combat, I think this is honestly my favorite game in terms of the whole level design, combat, and just everything you get from it. Not to mention it adds also APCs and helicopters later into certain encounters, which just, if it wasn't crazy enough, just adds that to the part of the game. That's not to say the game is perfect though, because a lot of encounters were really weirdly placed in that aspect in terms of the whole grass movement, and honestly, the beginning first encounter of the game is really frustrating, especially on crushing, considering that there's really nowhere to go without being spotted immediately. So in terms of the level design, it is good, but a lot of it still has issues with the game. So with the Uncharted series pretty much being built around its characters, of course the villains almost make or break the game in some aspect. And luckily, Asaf is a good villain, just really underused at this point. He had a really good introduction. He's really different compared to all the other villains we've really seen in the franchise. He kind of gives like a soft-spoken, calm kind of vibe to him, and I've even gone to the point to say that he's kind of like a librarian, but of course there is a twist later on in the game where he actually really is experienced in terms of combat and can even take down both of you and Nadine at the same time, and that was pretty much a big surprise to me. Asaf is a really good character. I just felt like around midway through the game, he kind of took a backseat, and we only saw him in like maybe a couple cutscenes throughout the game, and honestly, if it goes to the point where you're playing like an hour and a half of the game and you don't see the villain, it's kind of like, where are you trying to accomplish here? And I almost even forgot that Asaf was in this game when you're just going through and you're just mindlessly doing these puzzles trying to find the lost city and you don't even have any mention of him at all. So yeah, if he would have been in the game a little bit more, I felt like he would have been a lot more memorable and it would have suited the story and just his character a lot better. So when comparing the level design between this game and any other game, obviously it stands out as probably being like closest to Among Thieves. Now Uncharted 2 had some really good level design in my opinion, and when you get to the statues later on in the game in terms of the lost city, a lot of them look very familiar. There is that one puzzle where you have to move the hands to open up that little gateway that kind of looks familiar from Uncharted 2, and almost looks exactly like it in my opinion, and it's crazy how close and kind of like nods they give to the series. Not to mention that when you go later up in that part of that big old room, there is that whole light gameplay where you're shining the lights onto the different beams, kind of like a puzzle. Now the puzzle wasn't that good in my opinion. I feel like some of the puzzles were hit or miss in this game. A lot of them were great, but some of them just felt controlled weirdly, like that one. But it was a really cool nod to Among Thieves nonetheless, and it was awesome. I love that part. So I guess I've covered everything but really one thing, and that's kind of like the set pieces. Now, besides the story and the characters, the set pieces were kind of what disappointed me the most. Now, after Uncharted 4, we all knew that was going to be kind of like a grounded last adventure of Nathan Drake, but I really felt with like Lost Legacy, they're kind of hinting that they're going to go back to its roots, and I thought we would have gotten a lot more, you know, kind of set pieces. Not to the fact like of 3 when you're falling out of a, you know, a plane, but just in general, the set pieces seem to really be disappointing in that fact. Now, we all know that whole helicopter image that was circling around Twitter about a couple weeks before the game came out, I think maybe about a week or two, and that did not happen in the game whatsoever. The helicopter part was very much a lot more anticlimactic than that, not to mention that you just take it down with RPGs you found throughout the level. I felt like a lot of the set pieces were very underwhelming in that fact, and only the one that really stands out to me is kind of the train sequence at the very end. Now, you kind of need to have a little bit of, you know, variety, and I really felt like the first half's pacing would have been a lot better if they would have added something like that, like an epic transition for a set piece or something like that to get to where you need to go. I felt like that would have been perfect when it was kind of being a little bit slow in that aspect. But yeah, the only ones that really stand out to me are kind of like the train one, maybe the whole elevator collapsing thing, but other than that, the helicopter one is cool, but it is kind of just a set piece where you just climb into the helicopter and you get a cutscene of taking out Orca, and that's about it. It was a cool cutscene nonetheless, but man, was that kind of disappointing in terms of the set piece action. So yeah, Lost Legacy was very disappointing in terms of that aspect to me. I just kept wondering when are we going to get to a certain part, and when we got to the elevator part, that was really cool. Don't get me wrong, that was a cool set piece, but yeah, it just kind of leaves with that empty feeling where it's like there could have been at least one more or so. So yeah, I guess besides that, the visuals are kind of like the exact same from Uncharted 4, maybe a little bit better. I think the Western Ghats demo, as I hinted earlier, kind of showcases the best. I mean, this world just seems very lively, like you're actually in India, and there's a lot more around you instead of just where you are. It definitely feels like it's like part of a greater thing. Obviously, Naughty Dog know what they're doing, and yeah, with each game, they just seem to top their last one, and Lost Legacy just looks very beautiful, especially in some scenes with like the rain and just the character facial detail. It's great. So yeah, in the end, Lost Legacy is definitely an awesome game. It may seem like I kind of ripped into this game because of my disappointments with it, but in the great scheme of things, it is another Uncharted game. There is some differences to it, but a lot of it is just like, if you want to jump back into this world, this is an awesome game for you. Now, in terms of ranking it to the other games, it's really hard to do that because I don't really feel like what this game really tackled, in my opinion. You got more, you know, exposure to what Chloe Fraser is kind of driven by and more of her family. But to compare it to like things like Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 2, where you get monumental like impact in terms of story and just in terms of everything, it's really hard to fit this somewhere. I definitely think it might top 1 or 3 possibly, but in the end it is really hard to like mix this and rank it into the other games. So that's definitely something I'm gonna like, you know, kind of let myself think about and just not come to a conclusion just yet. But yeah, definitely I'd recommend this to anybody wanting a story-driven game or just a fan of Uncharted in general. It might be my game of the year. I'm not sure about that yet. Horizon and Crash are both really good games, but I definitely think it's in the top 2 or 3. And yeah, it's more Uncharted. It's really good, but in fact, it is more Uncharted, so maybe some people will find it like not needed, but I definitely think what's there is definitely, you know, something different to the franchise. And just the whole triple dynamic between Sam, Chloe, and Nadine at the end is definitely something that adds to the story a little bit and kind of builds that relationship off that ended in 4, you know, of course, Sam and Nadine. I definitely think it has a lot of cool parts that if you're a fan of Uncharted, you definitely need to play this, honestly. Just with all the little hints and nods and just everything. You know, it's more Uncharted. You know, if I was doing scores, I'd definitely probably give it around the ballpark of maybe like an 8 or an 8.5. I don't think it touches where those last Uncharted games were, or like those ones in the past, definitely. I don't find it so special like other people are saying. It is a good adventure, but I feel like it ends just there. It's not something phenomenal. It's not something amazing. It's a great game, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that's like astounding phenomenal. I feel like I just played this game last year. It's not too different from Uncharted 4, but it is more Uncharted in that way. And just add some more story and character dynamics, which is cool. But yeah, with that being said, I despise scores. It's like one of the things I just hate about the whole video game industry is just giving a score. Just giving a game a score is just something idiotic to me. Like, just label a game with a score just seems really stupid in my opinion, but that's definitely where I come into my system. I definitely would recommend Lost Legacy. I definitely think it's one of the best games to get this year, especially in this dry period of like August and September. I definitely think you can't go wrong with $40. Definitely don't think it's like one of Naughty Dog's best games, but in terms of the pacing and action, I can see how some people might think that, but to me, it just felt like another Uncharted game, which is great, but not something like phenomenal like 4 change to me, or like 3 or 2 or 1. Just doesn't seem that special in my opinion. But yeah, I've enjoyed my time with Lost Legacy. I hope you guys do if you enjoyed it. I'm guessing if you guys watched this review, you have played it, so make sure to let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I know a lot of people are going to be kind of surprised with what I had to say. I was very positive in the meantime, but looking back at it, it just didn't change me as much as like the other games, which I don't think it needed to, but it doesn't really add to the franchise in that aspect in a way. So yeah, I definitely like the game a lot. Definitely think it's great. But yeah, really interested in hearing what you guys think about that. Make sure to leave a like on the video as always. If you enjoyed the review, make sure to smash the subscribe button if you are not yet subscribed. And yeah guys, I have been online, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.